Welcome back, everybody, to episode number 3. Yes, there's now 3 of these of the TO Desk presented by 956 Productions. As always, I'm Shib presenting you yet another episode. Awesome, great topics that we got today, and I've got a rare guest. I'm here joined by Coren, who is now on all 3 of these episodes, perfect attendance, and Hagure. Hagure, tell me, how you doing?
What's good, y'all? What's up? I'm doing all right. Yeah.
All right, cool.
Happy holidays to y'all out there.
Oh yes, this is going to be out there. This episode is going to be out there right in the middle of holiday season. It's going to be just Christmas is going to be just around the corner, or whatever you observe. Obviously we're hoping you the best of luck and health in that holiday season. Coren, talk to me. What's up?
Shibarizu has digitally kidnapped me and will not let me leave. Please
Yeah.
send help.
Not until the episode's recorded. Okay, I got obligations. Come on now. This is part of my duties. But don't worry, I'll let them out later. Let's talk about what we have on episode number 3, which is going to be 3 parts. We're going to talk for the majority of the show about older hardware and retro gaming and emulation, and then we're going to talk about Final Fantasy XIV. Just something completely out of left field. I know y'all in the FGC love that game. I'm right there with you, so I'd like to talk about it, and I'm going to have Chickzama on later to talk about it with me, and we'll just kind of walk you through like what we expect and how excited we are and what we think about that the permeation of that game in the FGC and what it means to all of us. But first, I want to talk about events on retro/old hardware. That's going to be our first topic today. So we're going to talk about handling inputs, software collections, emulations presence in that whole debacle, and it's just some tips and tricks that we have as organizers. What we can bring to the table with our expertise, and that's why I have our dearest vampire savior head over here on the show today. So let's talk about old hardware. So not every game is ported constantly, and maybe not every game has reliable emulation, and so nothing quite beats the original hardware. And depending on what you're playing, there may be various degrees of backwards compatibility. We've seen Xbox with their excellent backwards compatibility. I do want to do a quick shout out. I wrote an article on supercombo.gg about Dead or Alive. You can play every version of Dead or Alive on Xbox, on the latest Xbox console. You can even buy them all. I just want to say that's awesome. Okay? This podcast episode would be a lot shorter if you could do that for every game. Alas, you cannot. Okay? So with that in mind, we could talk things like Vampire Savior. I just brought it up. We could talk about Marvel vs. Capcom 2 and talk about a lot lately. Some things don't really you just can't beat them, the original hardware. So I guess talk to me, Coren. Is there any particular games that you feel are locked away to the best version, the best way to play is on the original hardware?
Yeah, there's a lot of games right now where there's just no good way to play them than on like retro systems like the PlayStation 3.
Right.
Yeah, like I run Aquapaza as one of my main games that I run and that I'm known for.
Uh-huh.
And like the best way to play that game is on PlayStation 3, which, is kind of an old system at this point. Like you can have to take your PS3 in to get repaired now if you don't know what you're doing when you crack it open. Like those fat ones are starting to die out. And like a lot of those games in that era just do not have good net play. So like the only way you can play them is like you have to drag out the console.
Yeah, and a lot of that has to do with the PS3 saw a lot of ports. Somehow it just saw like a lot of ports, like
Yeah, they got a lot of ports on the PS3.
arcade ports. Dengeki Bunko had predominantly PS3 port. And then there was the Marvel vs. Capcom Origins collection, which playing that on PS3 is probably the easiest way to do it now. Then there was what is it called? Darkstalkers Resurrections. What is it called?
Yeah, Darkstalkers Resurrection.
Yeah, that version as well. Just games that for some reason they just kind of stopped porting those games, and they started doing like compilations that come out every once in a while, like the Street Fighter 30th collection, which the same cannot be said of Vampire Savior or Marvel vs. Capcom. Those games haven't seen compilation releases since then. So we're starting to see ports kind of go out of style, for some reason, even though people seem to, enjoy having them. So maintaining the hardware has become a concern a lot of people have. Hagure, do you have any games that you feel, are best experienced on the original hardware?
Well, for me, I mean, I love me my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighters on Super Nintendo. Yeah, the emulation and stuff that they have out there is pretty cool. Especially nowadays. There's something called the Mister, which we can talk about a little bit later.
Yeah, we can talk about that one
Um,
later because it's kind of a midway between emulation and real.
yeah. But as I play pad for that game. So especially for me, like playing it on the original console is pretty nice. If you play stick, a lot of people who do play stick for that game, so, you might not have the, emulation might be better for you there in some cases, but yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
definitely
So
one that sticks out to me.
let's talk about that in terms of running events. Let's say let's just put ourselves in the meat of it. Let's talk about we're running an event for a game, and it's got some retro hardware that we got. We managed to secure the original cartridges or disc and the original hardware. We've got some controllers there, but now the thing is, if we're running events for retro games, we have to think about proprietary slots, proprietary ports for these controllers. Because USB didn't really become sort of a thing until the Xbox 360 and PS3 generation. I mean, consoles had them, of course, right? But they didn't accept input that way. And then it eventually became the normal way of accepting input. And even then, uh, controller firmware gets outdated. We have situations, or maybe the controller firmware is not backwards compatible is also another thing. So you have like PS4 sticks that don't work on PS3, and sort of like going down the line. What can we do to kind of manage that? Because it's fine for us, maybe who've dealt with the hardware already, and we're all just kind of have our old sticks and old pads and stuff. But I think the thing that a lot of us who play these games for a long time want is also to introduce new people to them, right? Because obviously we love those games and we want to bring them forward to a new generation. But what can we do about that? Terry, do you have any input on that?
Well, I would say first of all, before we get into all that, like the same thing that I tell everyone who's like thinking about running retro events and stuff. I'm like, don't. This shit is hard. Like it's hard. It's expensive. There's a lot of issues. With the consoles, you get it's a little bit better, but just as you were alluding to, like if you're trying to get stick players to use their Obsidian Quamba Obsidian on like a Super Nintendo or and then, like you said, like even especially now as we're entering the generation of PS5, right? Like we're gonna just have an even more of a gap where these newer sticks aren't going to be compatible with this older hardware. So yeah, before you hop into this, you dip your toes into the retro waters, definitely think really hard about it because it's a whole thing, like, right? I
It's a
mean
whole
that's
thing.
why you got people like me on coming here as special guests to shows to talk about that. But if you're committed, as I am and as many people are in the FGC and beyond too. You can't talk about keeping old games alive without talking about the smashing, right? They've done so many things to keep their old ass melee alive, right? So there's definitely some things that you can learn from folks who've been in and around for a long time, and there's always like especially these days, the retro gaming community, even outside of the FGC and beyond, has started to grow a lot. So there's new tech coming out constantly. New ways to get your controllers connected, new ways. You can put your old consoles or your old systems onto flat screens like HDMI
Right.
screens and stuff like that. So yeah, there's definitely a lot to do. So yeah, but yeah, like I said, think really hard about it because it's not plug and play, right? Like if you want an optimal experience, that you can have other players play on. It's a lot harder than just, hey, just buy this one thing and then plug it in and you're golden, right?
Right. But I think you know, you mentioned Smash Scene. In particular with Melee, I talked about backwards compatibility at the beginning, and I was actually talking with some of our team in voice chat before we did the recording. We were talking about Melee specifically. How and the question was like, if you were to build a Melee, like I don't know what the word would be called, like a setup. You want to build a Melee setup. What do you need, right? And we found that or how expensive, how much is it going to cost you, right? That's the real thing. And we found that depending on the answers to your approach, the price can vary a lot, or the things that you buy can vary a lot. Like, for example, one of the things that doesn't change and is actually quite surprising is that Nintendo still sells official GameCube controllers, right? They are original model, specification. For all intents and purposes, they are the same, which is not something you see anywhere else. So that is a particularly unique situation. The other thing about it is, if you decide to play Melee, you have the option of using a GameCube, a Wii, or if you are willing to use Homebrew, a Wii U, because you can unlock the GameCube compatibility, and that at least brings us to two consoles that have ports for GameCube controllers, right? If you decide to go for a Wii U, you would need to buy the adapter, which does work, because they did manufacture them, and I believe the Switch adapter for GameCube does work on Wii U as well, because it's literally just the same firmware, something like that. So you have a lot of options actually in terms of just plugging in your controller and getting it working. The thing is that depending on what model you decide to buy, you may need to purchase additional equipment. For example, if you buy a GameCube, you're gonna want to have it set up to a CRT. You're probably gonna want to have it set up to a CRT no matter what, just because of the responsiveness and also the way the game was designed to look.
It's magic 3 letters, man. CRT.
Yes, sir. So there's a lot of factors in terms of just like basically buying the hardware, and also if you decide to buy a Wii, Wii's are still, Wii was sold everywhere. It's probably the easiest way to do it, and because it accepts GameCube discs right out the box.
I think the only console that was like comparable in terms of like sales for the Wii was the PlayStation 2. So
yeah,
they're
exactly.
everywhere, and they're
they're
cheap.
everywhere. Yeah, exactly, and they are cheap. GameCubes are not as cheap
for now.
For now. GameCubes are not as cheap comparably, and you could argue that you have less functionality, right, out of buying a GameCube to play Melee, because you do not
Harder
have
to mod that GameCube.
Exactly. Modding a GameCube is less trivial. So controllers. I do want to talk a little bit about the market outside of Smash. There are resellers out there, Brooks, 8-Bit Dough, that sell, aftermarket converters for these controllers. Do your research as to the input latency introduced by them, right? Because you don't want to buy yourself a crappy, factory somewhere converter, and suddenly it feels really bad to play your game.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's something to be concerned about. But if you are able to do your research, it's definitely, I think that the best way to deal with it is that the TO should be as transparent as possible as what hardware is being used. If it's emulation, less of a problem, but just, know what to expect from the emulation. If it's original hardware, what hardware is it? Because then you may wish to bring your own adapter if the TO permits it, right? Because who knows, what the TO was able to acquire, if any, right? So definitely be aware of that stuff if you're interested in participating in retro games at offline events. That's just one part of the whole thing, as Hagure was saying. Also is the versions of the games. This is something that is not talked about a lot, but is kind of part of every single retro game. Pre PS3, pre PS3 360 is what I'll say. Like revisions make very minuscule but important differences in terms of what you can play or what to expect from the game that you play. I don't know, Hagure, do you have any experiences with like different game versions? Is there anything like really big difference that people don't really know to look out for that you can recall?
I got one last thing on
Oh, sure,
controllers.
Corey, tell me.
So like I've noticed kind of there's been like a paradigm shift on like control schemes for players. Like recently I've been bringing my PlayStation 2 out for some poverty to the locals. And like 10 years ago, what I was doing before would have been fine, where you bring your console, you got a couple spare sticks, maybe some spare pads, you got everything covered there, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's not really the case anymore. Now there's a lot of like dedicated keyboard or hitbox players out there who play on like USB things. So like things like bringing some converters over that you can plug their hitbox into your old ass console like really helps out, because like those players may not even know how to play like fighting games on stick or pad.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those games
Yeah.
exist. That's actually something important to bring up. Like the audience for these people who are new to the game, right? But want to show up to these events, they probably play on emulation, right? And they just plug it into their or they might play on a modern port somewhere, right? Even though that might not be the ideal way to play, it probably accepts their input device a lot easier. So that does create more disparity in input devices. So definitely, I think transparency in like what you're running is the best way to deal with that. And also, if someone's new, just tell them, hey, here's what to expect. Don't show up without having this converter or knowing about this and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Good to
and
educate
like when it
people.
comes to running retro events, especially these days, kind of like what Coren was saying, bringing just like your PS2 stick to play like a CVS2 tournament on PS2, like doesn't really cut it so much these days. And a large part of that is because, again, like I was mentioning, the tech has progressed. We have, definitely shout outs to Brooks for coming out with some PS2 and Dreamcast converters for modern USB sticks. And that's pretty much the tournament standard that you see these days when you're running stuff on original hardware. Is that, you'll have, like, especially like Marvel 2, right? Like you'll have and I mean, it goes a lot to say that like if you're able to use a converter for Marvel 2, a crowd that is very input lag sensitive, um, yeah, that it's a great product that they have. And generally these days, TOs will provide will provide the hardware, are expected to provide the hardware. So when it comes to converters and stuff like that, so yeah, so Dreamcast, PS2, you're looking at Brook converters. Older consoles, I know Brooks. They're also, I think they were developing a Super Nintendo one.
Yeah, I think they
Um,
have a Famicom and like a DB9 one for like Genesis and or Mega Drive if you're like anywhere else in the world but here, and like Atari and old stuff like that.
Can I talk about
yeah,
something
yeah.
that just popped up on my timeline?
Go right ahead.
SNK has just announced that the ACA Neo Geo series of ports will be expanding to mobile. They have just announced 3 games that will be making it over to iOS and Android. So we were just talking about ports. Here we go.
Mobile ports of fighting games, always a
Always a
fun
fun. Oh yeah,
territory.
they're not all of them are fighting games, but there is one, and it's an insanely cursed choice if you ask me. So I'm gonna go with the ones that are not fighting games. So, Alpha Mission 2, is a shmup.
Okay, okay.
Metal Slug 5, Metal Slug,
Of
and
course,
the
yeah,
the
Dragon
fighting
Ball, of
game
course.
is Samurai Showdown 4.
4? I knew it.
Hell
When you
yes.
said it was cursed, I was like, watch, it's gonna be Sam Show 4.
All
So
right, I'm
yeah.
gonna learn how to do the bus Nakaruru infinite on my phone.
I just want to say that this. Okay, yeah, I want to get to that in a minute, but I just want to say that the screenshots of this show me that the emulation does not do anything to compensate for the flicker in Sam Show 4 on the
Hell
life
yes.
bars. So I don't know how good this port is gonna be because you can see that.
That's part of the experience.
I don't know how good the emulation of these are gonna be, but like I said, people come from all walks with these ports. I wrote a small article about Marvel 2 in this context,
Oh,
And I
I
linked a
haven't read
video.
that one yet. Did you write about the iOS port?
Yeah, dude, right at the end,
Yo, that
I went
Marvel 2
looking
iOS port
for
is sick.
I went looking for footage of it because I wanted to show people. I'm like, you got to take it seriously when people, when these ports come out, because people will discover the game these ways. And there, I found some footage of some very low res, half frame rate footage of someone doing the Thanos bubble infinite on the mobile
Okay.
version.
Yeah, no, you could do some weird combos in that game. There's
Yeah,
like
because you can do mediums.
yeah, you can do mediums. There's like I mean, if you're familiar with Marvel 2, with Suki canceling, like that's just like kind of like a feature in the
Yeah.
game.
Rogue has like an infinite where she just does medium punch.
Yeah, it's a really interesting, but despite all that, it's obviously not real Marvel 2, but it's pretty fun. Like it was
Yeah,
pretty
yeah,
fun
yeah.
especially when it
It
came
is
out,
real
right? Because
fun
it
to
came
do the
out
Iron
like
Man Infinite on a touchscreen.
yeah, because I mean I'm talking it came out like it's like what iOS 4, so
yeah, yeah.
iOS 5 or something. So
It was
like it's
back
like
when
in between.
iOS
Like
games
you
were.
can't even play it. That's what sucks right now. And shout outs to the people who are trying to preserve these digital games because that's definitely a thing. It's a loss to the sands at times because you can't play it on modern devices.
Yeah, you
So
can't.
you need to have like a old device or some kind of emulation style situation to even play that game. So,
Yeah. I
but yeah. Wow.
that
Okay.
that's
Cool.
something to talk
Shouts.
about. I mean, yeah, and we were going to talk about game versions. I mean, there's so many different versions of games, of these games that are out there. Like these retro
Mhm.
games tend to have a lot of different revisions, right? And everyone has to agree on a standard. Even the nuances of the standard can be discussed, right? Like, um, I remember for a time there was concerns about the version of King of Fighters 98 on Fightcade, because specifically if you don't know, I guess for people who are listening, if you don't know, Fightcade maintains save states, right, for all of their games, so that when you start playing against somebody, it instantly puts you at the character select screen. Now, in KOF 98, characters have moods depending on the day, okay, and that is based on the
What?
clock. Yeah. That happens. That they have.
I never knew that.
Yeah, if you don't know, okay, if you guys have never seen this, go boot up KOF 98, and right when you are on the team select, right, it has a order select for your team. It has little faces next to the characters, like an angry face or a happy face.
Oh,
That's what
that
that
thing.
is.
Yeah,
That's what that
yeah.
is. It's called
Oh, that
moods.
depends on the time of
It depends on
day.
the day. Yeah, it's based on your clock. Yeah.
Oh.
That's the seed for that. It's the clock. So people, even though the version that was on Fightcade was correct, the problem is that the moods would not change because of the emulation.
Mm.
It was just loading the save state. So this got patched, and now you can play it, like it would be in an arcade, where on a given day it would be different. Thankfully, but that was a thing. That was definitely a thing. So you have a lot of weird little gotchas, and this is not even getting to stuff like PAL versions of games. Like if you go way back, then you have to deal with the PAL version or the NTSC version of the game. Or you deal with like really bad ports, like or not. I guess bad is subjective, but like really just like different ports, like ports that changed a lot about the game. Um, Vampire Chronicles shoutouts, I guess. That game has its own page about all the differences that came up with that, even though they were supposed to be kind of like collection. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different game versions out there, and if you're gonna do retro stuff, it's difficult to kind of reach a consensus sometimes, but definitely do
Yeah.
your research and ask the players, what they are used to, and just if you're working on like a wiki, for example, for a game, that's usually a great way to set a precedent, like what version is the one that people will document. So that's a thing. Speaking
Yeah,
of
for
that,
sure. I was gonna say, yeah, I
yeah,
know like with Capcom games in particular, especially like the Versus series, like X-Men Street versus Street Fighter, Marvel vs Street Fighter, versions play a really heavy role in the way the game is played. Because they were they were super popular, so they stuck around for a little bit longer. than other CPS2 games at the time. But also they were super broken, so they were patched a lot more often. And I feel like even to this day, like there's some patches that aren't really documented what changed yet. So like for example, with X-Men vs Street Fighter, you'll have a ton of infinites that'll work in one version of the game, but were later on patched out. And so generally, at least in the Capcom scene, you'll find the player base has kind of standardized upon the whatever one is the latest and last version of the patch.
Right.
Except Third
But
Strike.
that's what I was gonna say. Third Strike is a different one, and
Oh, I want to know about that.
especially
I
when
actually
you're
don't
when
know
you're
what.
thinking about ports and stuff, like ports come with their own patches a lot of time too. So that's why some people are like, yeah, I don't want to play that port, or
Yeah.
such and such. So
What is the deal with Third Strike's revision? I actually have no idea.
Is
Educate
it?
me.
It's version B is the one that people don't like.
yeah, I think I
It, it
think
was
it's
it was a
B.
later like a hot fix patch they put out,
Mhm,
which fixed some things that Capcom considered a glitch and that people considered part of the game.
mhm.
Right. So I mean, see, that's the thing, right? Like the version that people want to play is ostensibly the version that became part of like Fightcade, and is
Yeah, yeah.
probably the
The
version that is
main
on those
thing is like
ports.
Urian unblockables, and there's like a couple other things, right? But the
Oh
big
yeah.
thing that changes is that Urian doesn't have unblockables in version B.
Yeah,
Ooh, yeah. You don't want You're not gonna make people happy with that.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So
And
yeah. Talk to me, Terry. I'm sorry.
yeah, and I was gonna say that's why especially like with kind of like official version changes. So for example, Street Fighter Alpha 3, there's
Double upper.
newer version, yeah, upper or double upper or whatever. You don't see people playing that game. It's available on Fightcade. There is kind of especially now that Alpha 3 is kind of seeing a bigger player base come into the game. People are trying to explore it more. But yeah, at least in the US, people don't really like that game because it patched out a lot of the Vism stuff that made
Yeah,
fusion
yeah.
cheap.
In Japan as well, I believe that upper and
You
double
know what?
upper aren't like preferred versions, because if you're gonna play Alpha 3, and you kind of just accept that Vism is the game.
Yeah, exactly. I do want to say though, apparently that version of the game has added input lag, is what I was told.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Yeah,
Yeah,
it has added input lag to account for because that was a kind of the version that we used for net play,
Yeah.
and yeah, the input lag was to in the pre-rollback days to account for just typical input delay.
Yeah, and I
For
mean, I feel like
doing that code.
even if people did accept the balance changes, that is kind of a deal breaker, to be honest. Like that kills
Yeah.
the ability to enjoy it, in a rollback setting later. So
Hmm.
that
And
is a
then you
thing.
have like the Game Boy Advance port, which comes out with like I think there's like 8 new characters.
Yeah.
Like there's 2 characters in the Game Boy Advance version that aren't in any other port, which
yeah.
are
The PSP version
Maki.
has
Oh wait, 3. Maki, Yun, and Eagle. Um, the Street Fighter 1 slash
yeah,
CVS2
yeah, yeah.
character. And those characters are super fun. Like, if you ever get a hand of that version, like, you should definitely check out those characters because, especially in a system mechanics like Alpha 3, which are so free flowing, having those characters in those games are really fun to play. But
And then the PSP version of it has like Alpha Collection, I think it was, has it has Yun as well, and Ingrid's in it too, isn't she?
Yeah,
Ingrid,
Ingrid.
oh yeah, she's in the Game Boy Advance one too. Yeah, Ingrid's super fun too. Yeah, so
There's a ton of
yeah,
different versions of these games. It's just not, it's not like that anymore. Everyone plays the
Once
same
upon a
damn
time, they
thing.
used to give you ports.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The patches were hard coded, right? So like they're so it's just like today, like you can't play the release date of SF5 very easily, right?
You got to have that
Unless you
original
have
disc.
the disc, you have to have the original disc, and you can't update your console and stuff.
Yeah, this goes back to
Yeah,
what we were talking about on our previous episode, like, whether or not we can
Can't version control
yeah, we can't
anymore.
version control whether or not, TO should allow DLC or not, and it's like, well, we don't really have a say in that matter anymore. The whole version thing is out the bag. Um, so yeah, I will say that there's a lot of different versions to manage, and it's kind of a conundrum, right? And it will definitely develop as more more ports of the game become more easily accessible, right? Like if a new version comes out and people want to play it and the technology has met the previous versions, then some things can change. Which, speaking of emulation, I'm talking about emulation when I say all that. So I don't know. I guess I'll ask you, Terry. Like, if somebody really wants to get into emulation, like what or like into retro games, like is emulation like the best way to start? Is that good enough for most people? What is that? What is your view of that?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, emulation is great. Especially with Fightcade, Flycast. Shout outs to Blue Minder, by the way,
Yeah,
and North
big
Town
shout
Battle
outs.
But yeah. Emulation is a perfect way to start. You have a whole library of fighting games that run very well. Like of course, purists will be like, yeah, online's not real, blah blah blah. But these days, like with the rollback, like and like you mentioned before, a lot of times it's better to play these games on emulation than it is to even, play like whatever kind of built-in netcode that they have. And sometimes, because of all the hardware issues, it can be a lot easier and a lot more fun to play online through Fightcade, or even use Fightcade in person,
Yeah,
which I
just
know
boot it up.
was definitely a thing that people did for a good period of time in this community. So yeah, definitely yeah, check out Fike if you're interested in especially the era of games that came before PS3. So from like Dreamcast and before till like arcade days. Yeah, Fikeade is a super good resource. Yeah, it's available on pretty much all computing platforms, although Flycast itself is not yet available on Mac OS. I believe there is I don't know if it's released yet, but I know the developer for Flycast is, I think they released a Linux version of it
Yeah, there is.
already. There's okay, yeah, and they're also working on the Mac version of it. So but yeah, I mean, I know most people are up on PC, so definitely check that out. Netcode is great. Flycast was a project that started even before it was introduced to Fightcade. There's also um, Bear, No DC Bear,
Yeah.
which was very popular, especially last year during the pandemic. But all those projects, super awesome way to get introduced to these games, and if you do really love these games and you kind of want to go further into it, then you can start looking at, okay, how do I play this on original hardware, or how do I, kind of make the experience, a little more, quote unquote, realistic, or, more like how it was meant to be played.
Right, right. Um, emulation.
I got a bit of a Sophie's choice question for you, Hagure.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so if you like wake up in like one of those rooms from Saw with the reverse bear trap on,
Mm-hmm.
and Jigsaw looks at you and he's like, "Would you like to play a game? You're gonna play Vampire Savior and run a tournament, but you have a Saturn, the Fightcade version, and Darkstalker's Resurrection. Which version do you play? Like, what are you running that on?
Um, is it an in-person tournament?
Yeah, in person.
Uh, are we playing on CRTs?
Yeah. He's got all the CRTs and stuff, but you have to run a tournament for his like weird puppet dudes.
Okay. DSR.
Okay, yeah.
Darkstalker's Resurrection. Um, yeah, definitely. It's not the great. It's not a perfect port. But is by far the best one. Fightcade is great. Don't get me wrong. But playing Fightcade in person for a tournament, that experience leaves some to be desired. Um, whereas DSR is a console game, so super easy to run a tournament on.
Oh
Is there
yeah.
anything wrong with the Saturn version in particular, or is just DSR just better?
DSR is just better. The Saturn version is good enough, especially at the time that it was made. It's a pretty good version. In general, the Saturn versions of fighting games, especially for that era of games, are really good. especially when you compare them to like the PS1 or PS2, even the
Yeah.
PS2 games. A lot of times you'll see the Saturn version to be preferable. But yeah, there's just there's a few minor things that don't match up. Um, so yeah, I would say DSR is probably the one I would use.
The
Okay.
one thing I've never heard anything from. Okay, so for here's a bit of a history for people. The first console that had like an official port of Super Turbo on it was the 3DO.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah.
I've never heard from anyone about how the 3DO port is.
There's a video, or there's a series of videos on YouTube that cover every version of Street Fighter 2 on like every retro console, like every console version. And it goes over the 3DO specifically. I think the thing is that like Street Fighter 2 in particular is weird, right? Because
The spaghetti code. Man.
yeah, because not only was it kind of like a mess, but the thing is also that it wasn't about it was not about when Street Fighter 2 got ported, it was not about getting the arcade experience. It was
How
about
do we
getting
get this game
it's
onto
it's
this
yeah, it's
thing?
like people are fucking buying the hell out of this game. We have to sell it to more people. Like the priority was just getting it there. People did not understand what a fighting game was until Street Fighter 2 and Mortal Kombat. So ostensibly they didn't have any expectations going in. They're like, "All right, this sounds really cool and everyone in the arcades plays it. So I must buy it." That's just kind of the end of it, right? So a lot of these ports are compromised. They really are. They're extremely compromised. But then, as people kind of realize, oh wait, people like playing fighting games competitively,
Ports
then
these days, like you might have to worry about like, oh, there's like one frame of lag on player 2 or something. But
I
back
mean
in the
input
day,
input delay is a thing people talk about now. But the thing is that like after Street Fighter 2, we found out that fighting game community might be a thing, right? So all the priority of ports shifted. Uh but I think the discussion of the many ports of Street Fighter 2 is kind of like its own thing.
yeah, that's a rabbit hole.
Yeah, cuz
Yeah, for
like
sure.
nowadays you just emulate the arcade version. Thankfully we're at a point
Yeah.
where that is a thing. Um Speaking of emulation, let's talk about this new thing called Mister that you brought up. So I heard that Vampire Savior at Climax of Night was run on a Mister. That it was entirely on that. What is a Mister, Terry? What the fuck am I talking about?
So the Mister, like, I'm definitely not the best person to explain it. I was super hyped about it when it first came out, but ran out of funds to get one myself. But a Mister is basically it's a FGPA, which is kind of like a computer that can, rearrange.
I can cover that. That's like
Oh
my
yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
field.
yeah.
Oh,
So
Coren, yeah,
it's
talk
a
to me.
field programmable gate array, which basically means that they've not only like copied the hardware, but they've emulated the hardware like physically using gates using the FPGA. So rather than just emulating the software and trying to like cover that, there's also like an aspect of it which mirrors the hardware. So they try and like map out what the original hardware of the device would be like, and then they program that into the FPGA, and then it like aligns all of its gates in a way that matches to that configuration. So you're getting as close to the original hardware as you can on like a single like component.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So like whereas you have like software emulation like what we're playing with like MAME and Fightcade and stuff like that, it's different because the software side of like the actual physical hardware, like there's like a say there's a distance between one chip and two chip, right? That's not really reflected in software emulation. Whereas in an FGPA, yeah, sorry, FGPA, yeah,
FPGA.
that's they make it so that it actually reflects that. It tries to get as close to the actual physical hardware as possible, and then you can run your games on top of that. So
Yeah.
yeah, Climax of Night. I believe that's probably one of the first kind of retro series that was ran on a CPS2 the original arcade hardware standard that switched over. So definitely shout outs to the Vampire Arcadia crew for making that happen. And yeah, from what I was reading, every outside of a few kind of you know just what's it called hard like controller configuration issues. The gameplay itself was fine. Nobody had any complaints about that.
Yeah. And I do want to make a couple clarifications about the idea of the Mister, right? The the Mister itself is a little box, right? Basically, is what you usually see them as. And so the nice part about this is that even though we are programming the little computer box to run as close to the original hardware as possible at a architecture level, right? Like the hardware level, that doesn't prevent us from making enhancements, right? And we touched on this at the beginning, like putting out an image onto a display, accepting modern hardware inputs, things like that. Uh, those kinds of things can be solved by actually bridging the gap between the original hardware design and what is available to us now. So, for example, these misters can output to, for example, HDMI, right? These misters can accept USB input. They can, generally, these Mister boxes that we're talking about do not have a cartridge slot for like the board or anything like that. They actually load the game from a file. So if you have the dumped ROM, you can play it from a little micro SD card or something, or the internal memory. That stuff you just cannot do, or not without going to extreme lengths to mod your system. You know what I mean? Like mod chips and DC, digital hacks and stuff like that. Like that stuff requires you to mod the board, and it requires specialists to do. But with the Mister box, you can get the original hardware performance and the enhancements, with none of that extra setup. So that is
we're also
really great.
starting to reach the point on a lot of like retro hardware's life where its life is starting to end. Like discs are starting to disc rot. Games that have CMOS batteries or like things like that are just dead now in some cases, and you have to like go through a very complicated process to try and bring them back to life.
Yeah, and just to give a little context of why VMP chose to go through Mister, and why it's a very appealing choice for folks, especially in the retro community. Um, first off is it is a little box. Like physically, it's basically the size of a soda can.
All right,
Yeah.
how many of them can you fit in a CPS2?
Yeah, one, two, probably eight. And
Yeah,
that's just the CPS2 A and B board,
yeah.
right?
Never
The
mind all
big
of the like shit you have to plug into it.
yeah, so exactly. So yeah, that's the first part is that, to run a retro event on original hardware, kind of why I was saying, a disclaimer in the beginning, like don't do this. It is a lot of gear. Like, you think streaming like an HDMI like a PS4, like, streamers have their big ass Pelican cases and stuff like that. Like, yeah, you have that, and then if you're trying to do retro stuff, then you have all the retro gear, which is you have the actual hardware, the arcade hardware itself, which is about the size of a small briefcase for a CPS2 A and B board. And then you have the cables that go out of it. You have a super gun, which is a very finicky piece of hardware. Um, what else? And then that only goes out to CRTs generally, using weird cables such as
Usually
SCAR
VGA or
or
RGB or
component.
SCAR.
Yeah, if you're lucky, yeah. In modern times, they have VGA, or with more modern like say
Yeah, like a
Naomi
Thomas Wave will have
or yeah,
VGA.
Thomas Wave, Naomi, they use VGA. But even then, like, what are you gonna put VGA in this day and age, right? So
With
then you have
10-year-old
another,
monitors.
yeah, you have another couple of boxes to convert that signal to even put it in, or you carry these huge ass CRTs, which are either they're very heavy
Get your Disney Princess
or
monitor out.
yeah, or very expensive. Like if you want like these days, a lot of times you'll see these things called PVMs, which are these really boxy, like Sony
Yeah, Sony
CRTs, which are
PVMs.
super clear. Like if you, I mean, all this stuff I'm saying about how hard it is to play, like once you get it all set it up, it's beautiful. Like don't get me wrong, it's definitely the best way and the coolest way to play.
And then if you're streaming on top of that,
Yeah, that's the other thing, and you have
Converters.
streams in this day and age, right? Like, who's gonna run a tournament without a stream? Like, streaming retro is even more of a blow up, because then you have to have splitters. You have to worry about, okay, people want to play on CRTs, but in order to stream it, we have to get it through HDMI to get into the capture card. So then you need converters and upscalers and dealing with sync, like these old consoles, like you don't just plug in like the red, yellow and white cables and then oh it's all good. Like they have a thing called sync too, which you, depending on what platform you're using and what CRT you're using and what capture card you're using, doesn't always line up. It's a lot better these days, again, as I was saying, like with the advances in technology. Really cool things, products like the RetroTink
Yeah, shout out to
have
Retro
made
Tank.
it way easier than before. The OSSE is another one that's really cool. Definitely a little bit more configuration involved in there. But yeah, it's still, even with these advances, just by the nature of it being really old and having a completely different paradigm in how these games are played and displayed. You're gonna have a lot of hardware, and that hardware is all very expensive. Like for example, if you want like the RetroTink 5X, which is kind of like the standard for streaming or to convert and upscale these old games into HDMI, you're looking at what I think it's $300,
Something
$400.
like that, yeah.
The standard super gun, you're looking the HAS home arcade system, that's $400.
Oof.
A PVM these days can run anywhere between 200 to 2 grand. Then you have the CPS2 hardware itself, which can also, like you're talking about thousands of dollars just to run one game, right?
Right, right.
There's other cool things like Darksoft for CPS2 and MVS, like SNK stuff, where you can kind of have like a basic like a ROM cart for these old games. So you can kind of cut some costs there, but even then, like one of those is like $500. So yeah, definitely
We
the
we were
costs
just
start
talking
adding
about
up.
yeah, we were just gonna get to prices. The
Yeah,
price of
and then
retro
don't forget
gaming.
about cables.
And don't forget about
Cables,
cables.
like you're talking about like $20 to $50 per
Hey,
cable.
listen, y'all. I got, I'm not trying to say that, I've got valuable equipment over here, but I have GameCube, original GameCube cables. Apparently, those are rare. I didn't know
Oh,
that.
those are. Oh yeah,
I have the
yeah.
originals. I didn't know that.
You have originals? Yeah. I know, like when I was before this company called HD Retrovision made component cables for PS2. Like people were like talking about the original component PS2 cables, and those were going on eBay for like $200, right? For like this 20-year-old cable that you wouldn't even be sure if it would work,
Yeah,
right?
the funny
exactly.
thing about the component cables is they kept making them like up through the PS3 era,
Yep. Yeah, yeah.
and they're
But
still like
the
expensive
PS3
now.
ones were actually worse.
Really?
There's something, yeah, some kind of components that they use that, yeah, everybody
That's
wanted the
depressing.
PS2 era ones, yeah, yeah, and I mean, and that's these are just like kind of the more popular systems for fighting games, right? Like if you're trying to play stuff on PS1 or Atomic Wave, right? That's another one that you can play like H&K, Akatsuki Blitzkampf. Like your things are gonna start getting more expensive just because they're a lot more rare than CPS2 stuff.
Thomas Wave
Oh,
prices
don't
aren't
even
that
get me into
bad,
Midway.
actually.
Like Midway stuff isn't expensive, but that shit is like, talk about versions and finicky stuff like that. That's a whole other
Yeah,
ball game
yeah.
that I don't even know about.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah. I mean, that's one of the cool things about the Mister, right? Is that it takes all those variables, all those like hardware things that you have to worry about, and puts it into one nice, neat little box, right? And not only does that you can configure your Mister so that it outputs HDMI and it can output retro signals at the same time. So you don't have to get that upscaler or converter or splitter, right? You just have two cables coming out of one box. When it comes to USB stuff, another thing for old school stuff, with arcade systems, shout out to Undammed, who created the UD-USB, which converts, USB signals to arcade JAMA standard. So that's those are two converters that you need to get for a two-player game. Each converter is another $50 each, right?
Yeah.
But
If
with
you
the
can get
Mister,
them, which is the hard part.
yeah, if you can get them, and that's the other thing about all this retro stuff, like the super gun, right?
Low runs.
Yeah, very low. These are hobbyists making these things, right? It's just one person. It's not, like sure, like some converters, like you have like
Undammed is not
Brooks.
a company; it is a dude.
It's one guy, right? And then when like I'm pretty sure like every time he releases, he's like, "Yo, I got some." Like, bam! Like you better be on that waiting list. You better be like on that
In
Twitter, like
there.
whatever it is. You need to follow these people because that shit will go just like that. Like, so yeah, it's definitely in a rough game. So the Mister coming out now, has changed a lot of that, and again, it's not the hardware. There's still, a lot of the times that people were playing on original hardware is because all the other alternatives, like there was something wrong, right? There was something off. It felt a little weird. So yeah, especially with these older games, right? Like you want to play on the original hardware.
Yeah.
But with Mister, and its kind of way that it works, it really took out a lot of those variables, but still delivered an experience which was very much comparable and indistinguishable, as we can see through the Makai tournament, from the original thing.
Yeah.
And it's still being actively developed too, so that's another cool thing. And the Mister can have a lot of cores, right? So it not only can it run, a CPS2 game. Like all you have to do is go into a menu, and then you can switch it to. I think there's MVS on it now,
Yeah,
so
there's
you
Neo
can.
Geo, there's CPS
Yeah.
boards, there's
mhm,
a lot of kind of like game specific cores as well, like just what you need to get a specific game to work.
Yeah.
Especially because some of those boards varied a lot depending on what you were playing. Um, I feel like oh yeah, there was some research on PlayStation 1 that
mhm.
that was happening, which
Yeah,
I
the
mean,
first PS1 game just came out last week or like a few weekends ago, I
yeah,
think.
yeah, that happened recently.
Um,
I mean, I kind of wonder what the limits of the FPGA hardware are going to be. I have no idea. It's not my field of expertise in software.
yeah. And
So
I know that's something that's kind of being reached with the PS1. So kind of what I was saying before about how the Mister can output to both digital and analog signals at the same time.
yeah,
That's one version of the board. There's another version of board which you can't do it at the same time. Like you can do each individually, but not at the same time.
right,
But losing that, you gain more. I think they have more like RAM slots, basically. To put it in layman's terms.
yeah.
So that it's easier to if you need more power from it, like you can get it.
Uh,
And currently with the PS1, it's like right at that limit where some things right now they require you to have that extra RAM. So
yeah.
yeah.
I do wanna say I in terms of like my expectations for where it goes, I would love to see if clone consoles end up looking into this field. Because that stuff has kind of stagnated into emulation. Like a lot of these, like oh, you can plug in your original Genesis cartridges or whatever and play the game. Like yeah, it'll read it, but it'll read it into like an emulator that has subpar performance, right? So
Yeah.
will they step into this field? Would they be willing to? Would people be willing to buy it? I think they would. I think people would love to have that stuff at a bigger level, especially if they can throw some resources at solving some of the problems associated with it. I can't remember the name of it, but there was a clone console recently that announced N64 support. Like you could they sell a module that lets you
Word.
plug in your N64 cartridge and it plays it, but it plays it in emulation. And N64 emulation has historically been very poor, or it's either very poor but performant or very accurate but extremely poorly performant. right? And it's just not worth. You just cannot sell a highly accurate, emulator in a box because it becomes too expensive. So I wonder if something like that would end up being, a potential solution to some of these more problematic emulation platforms. Hopefully, in the future we'll see. It depends on but I will say if that ever ends up happening, please respect the creators. A lot of people get screwed with these retro ventures and emulation, and people licensing their ideas to other people to make products. I really hope that does not go south for anyone if these things ever do reach the market. Because I really want to support the people
100%.
who have made the strides that have gotten us here. It's early days, but it's exciting times, and the people in the scene are doing great work. I guess now moving on to our next topic. We've talked about that for a while. Jesus. Just to kind of wrap up what we were saying, we've talked about a lot of different ways to do it. We've talked a lot of different factors to consider. Price is ultimately what is going to scale you up or down, right? And retro games are, getting more expensive. I have here on the topic list, just plain out, the retro gaming price bubble, and the first bullet point says graded games are a scam. They are a scam.
They sure are.
This whole thing, I just want to say it. I just need to get it off my chest. Graded games are a scam. Do not go to auction houses to buy retro games. Just don't. If there's a convention, right, that is of collectors, you may be able to buy them. If there's a local shop, maybe you may be able to buy them. If there's someone selling, try to get from them. Just you don't need to buy it in a little package. You're not gonna get that. There's no indicator of quality. There's no indicator that it even works. They don't even check if they work.
Yeah. So the highest grade for a graded game right now for the people who do these gradings for auctions and whatnot is for complete in box with original factory shrink wrap.
Right.
Now, if you're paying attention to what I just said, you should realize there's a problem with that.
Complete in the box with factory shrink wrap.
Yeah. Have a think about it. What's wrong with that statement?
Yo, that shrink wrap though.
How can they tell you if it's complete in box with the
how
shrink
can
wrap?
they tell you if everything's inside? There's no you have to
if nobody's opened it, how do they know what's in it?
Some fucking X-ray. I don't know.
I mean, if they X-ray it, that can damage, like, for anything that's solid state, like, you can damage it.
Yeah, that's like, true. Yeah.
It. Yeah, and I mean, this whole concept has kind of been a part of the gaming.
Well, I mean, it's the same thing
right?
that happens to like any like collectible thing that becomes like a hobbyist space, is that people realize there's a limited amount, and then they realize, hey, wait a minute, this is an unregulated market.
Yeah, and it's kind of the difference between folks like us who we use the games, we play the games, we do a lot of things with the games versus collectors, right? And the collector market, has, just like you said, it's become a thing where capitalists have been like, hey, unregulated market, let's do our thing, right? And you have these grading companies. These grading companies are the same companies that do the buying, the selling, broker all of these deals. So it's like they're basically writing their own rules. So they can say, they tell you what's an A grade, and they're the ones who are paying you for it. So it's just kind of like, wait, what? Right?
Yeah.
So it's definitely, I don't feel like we're talking to the collectors here. I know. With that said, like
I just need to say it,
collecting
man.
is cool. Like there's a lot of cool collections out there. There's a lot of cool hobbyist collectors out there who have a lot of respect for the medium and who care about games. Like, so it's definitely not like, oh, all collectors are bad or something like that. But the way that has progressed, especially within these past like 2-3 years, the whole grading thing is just gotten out of hand, got out of control, and is definitely a bubble and preying on people, right? But, I don't feel like as in the FGC kind of space that we're talking about over here, we're not into that. We want to play these games,
Yeah.
We get a game in the shrink wrap, we're opening it up. We're not reading the instruction manuals. We're just plugging that shit in and mashing buttons, right?
Yeah, I
Um,
do wanna just say, on this topic that the you know collecting is a good thing, and it's especially important, to me, somebody who cares a lot about preservation. Um,
yes, exactly.
I just want I my position on it as somebody who has recently gone out of their way to purchase consoles that are no longer being made. Um, I care more about buying the hardware that enables me to play the game than I do, you know, about the purity of the experience. What I mean by that is like it is going to be increasingly difficult to find cartridges for certain games. It's going to be increasingly difficult to replace peripherals for certain games. So you should not be you should be open to software modding and homebrew and doing everything you can to extend the lifespan of the hardware because it's not going to last you forever. And so, you know, when we talk about scaling, how do these prices affect us? How do they affect our ability to mash buttons, to play games, to bring these things to events? We need to accept that, at scale, probably got to emulate. At scale, we need to understand, running things on PCs. At scale, it'd be nice if we had a port of a game every once in a while. So if we're going to talk about, how we handle that bubble that exists currently, because eventually the bubble's going to burst. But even then, there are people who are going to have to deal with the after effects and what the prices look like after that. Um, ultimately, that stuff just kind of drives people to adopting the modern solutions, right? And it also forces them to get creative. Like I was just saying about the Mister. Like you can't sell somebody who plays on a Mister like your box copy of Street Fighter or something graded because they don't need it. They can load it from like an SD card. It blows that entire thing apart, and like retro hardware the same way. Like if the sticks that are being made in 2021 are better, guess what? The Mister can just accept it, and it just plays it. And so that's the exciting thing about these things in these fields, right? And eventually, emulation gets to the point that it solves a lot of problems, right? Like eventually, emulation improvements will make them very enjoyable. I know a lot of people who play Marvel vs. Capcom 2 competitively after all these years, they have a certain feeling towards the advancements of things like Flycast, because they may feel that the game has more input delay, or they may feel that it's not accurate, that there are differences that need to be addressed, and those things will be addressed in time, right? But if we're talking doing this stuff at scale, you have to talk about prices and buying things. And I mean, I know that at least down here where I live, shipping things is not really a thing. You don't. I rarely, if ever, buy things shipped, so I would probably not have access to a lot of enthusiast hardware. So I have to rely on software solutions. And even if you live somewhere nearby that you can pay the shipping or whatever, you still got to deal with the limited quantity of that stuff that's ever going to be made. I don't know. You guys have any last thoughts about playing old man games in 2021?
So you mentioned the PVM earlier, Hagure. Just off the top of your head, how much do you think those are going for right now?
So, it depends.
Don't look it
Like
up. Just
I don't.
guess.
Yeah. It depends a lot. Like, I'm over here in the Bay Area, right? I have a lot more access to a lot of things.
Right.
I got how many PVMs do I have? I think I have one, two, three, four, five.
Damn.
I want to say I have five. Yeah. I donated one to my local arcade, and game center. One of them I keep back at my family's home for when I never actually play games. And three of them I use for events. But yeah, I was lucky when I got them for about 120-ish to 130 each. One of them I was super lucky. I was at a garage sale. I was just driving by the garage sale. I saw that. I was like, "Yo, skirt." I was like, "How much you want for this?" They're like, "Yo, please take it. The shit's heavy." I was like, "Hell, you bet." I'm out of here. But yeah, like that was what 5, 6 years ago. Nowadays, I would say for a 14-inch, you're probably looking at 200 minimum for one.
All right, I'm on eBay right now.
Oh, eBay,
And
yeah,
a
eBay is gonna be super
PVM,
inflated.
like they want like $1,000 for a PVM.
Holy
these
shit.
days.
Yeah,
No.
For a good one,
a 20-inch, like a 20-inch, you won't
not
see
even like
under a grand.
14 to 19-inch, like they want like $1,000 for that. And
Yeah, eBay.
that's for a good one. For like one that's not that good, like it's got like color off in the middle, or like some burn in, or like the tint is off on the edges, which is a very common problem on these. Like they want
And on
like
top of that, they have to
500.
ship it to you.
Yeah, I'm
Shipping
including shipping in that.
CRTs is like, it doesn't matter how well they pack it. Like, and generally, a lot of people who sell stuff on eBay don't pack things. They'll just put it in a cardboard box and call
Oh
it a
yeah.
day. No, you need to wrap these things with like layers and layers and layers of bubble wrap. Put in the peanuts. Put in at least two cardboard boxes, and then pray that
Yeah,
it
like the
gets the
PVM more
best
so even than like a Turniton TV, because they are professional monitor equipment. They're supposed to be like hard bolted, installed in a truck somewhere.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, if you're trying to get a PVM,
Prices are
one,
insane right now, because for a long
prices are
time people were
insane.
saying it's the gold standard for like retro gaming is you got to get that PVM and run RGB on it.
Yeah, it's especially now that it's taken hold in the retro gaming community, like people know about
They
these.
are not $1,000 rare, but the prices are up there.
Yeah, the prices are definitely inflated. The best way to get them is hopefully be near a metro area, right? That's where you'll find old TV stations, old
Yeah.
video editing companies and stuff getting rid of these things. Um, yeah, buying
Also
it
like
online is definitely not the move.
oh yeah, that's the way to get got.
Yeah. Or look at Craigslist. That's all I can say is look at
Uh,
Craigslist. Look at places where people don't know what they have. That's how I got mine.
another hot tip is that companies besides Sony made professional video monitors for like
Mhm.
decades, and they made some pretty good ones too.
Yeah, definitely.
I've definitely thought about picking up a CRT in the last few weeks, so I'm gonna have to go head hunting.
And
Like
yeah,
the
and then you
Sonys
don't
are the
need to
preferred
get a
ones, but
PVM either. Like,
yeah.
there's plenty of good consumer, TVs that are great. That are super good. Yeah, and another option is old computer monitors. I feel like that's going to be the next hot thing. We were talking about VGA earlier, but especially if you're trying to run Dreamcast games, Dreamcast has that stuff built in. It has a VGA cable and stuff.
You know what? There was some suggestions I saw on Twitter a couple weeks ago saying that RetroTink and stuff is great, but that technology would be really great if it were applied to that kind of output, because obviously that stuff had limited resolution, and it might be nice to have upscaling solutions for that kind of thing. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to learn more about this, check out retrorgb.com. Um, yeah, RGB Bob is a really cool guy. Is really helped out a lot of the retro folks. Not only in the retro community, but also Furby, Arturo, is really close homies with this dude, and working together, they've come out with a lot of cool solutions and cool tech for, especially in regards to FGC retro stuff. So that would be the first place I would say to go, and just to learn about all of this kind of stuff. Um, you know, we can probably post some links in the show notes of more places where you can kind of learn more about the retro hardware,
Yeah.
PVMs, all that kind of stuff. But yeah. I mean, good luck to anybody out there trying to still look for these monitors. They're still out there. But like was said earlier, this is a old technology. This is a dying technology. Even though you can find the equipment, the people out there, a lot of times it's old, it needs repair. And the people who are out there who actually know how to repair them aren't really there anymore.
Yeah, that's another problem.
If yeah, a lot of times, at least here in Cali, you're hear about retro folks sending their PVMs to Nevada, to Las Vegas, because Vegas actually has a huge CRT technician community because of all the casinos and all of the slot machines and stuff like that,
That makes
from the
sense.
old casinos. Yeah, which is a really really interesting fun fact. But yeah, good luck. And
Good
especially
luck.
outside of the U.S., like
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
I have no idea where to start
With
there.
CRTs in particular, there's a lot of things that can break that you just can't fix. Like if that vacuum tube is damaged at all,
Yeah, you just need to replace it. There's yeah, you need
No
to
way to
replace
fix
it
it.
wholesale, and it's usually cheaper to just get a new TV. So
Yeah. So that's where we're at with retro in 2021. I think that about wraps up our discussion. Evidently, we all had a lot to say about it. You know
oh
that
yeah,
that comes with
don't
the
buy a
territory.
loose don't buy a loose N64 game for like $100.
But don't,
Just don't.
just don't, bro. Just don't.
yeah, I mean, I would say just with anything, with any community, right? Before you start, flashing the cash, talk to people. There's a lot of knowledgeable people. Even there's a ton more people who are more knowledgeable than I am about this stuff. And then, every scene, especially when you're talking about fighting games, right? Every scene, every console, every platform has different gotchas, has different prices, has, different kind of things that you need to look at. So talk to people first. There's plenty of resources. You can hit up Twitter. You can definitely hit up a lot of people on the Super Combo Discord. There's a lot
Yeah.
of knowledgeable people there. You hit up any of the retro game discords, like the VSAV Discord. We have a hardware channel where we're always posting stuff. Marvel Discord,
Yep.
Marvel 2 Discord has the same kind of thing. So if there's a particular game that you're really interested in, hit up the community first and talk to them. Figure out what the norms are because it's different for every game. And yeah, we can all work together to make it happen. And then we have these beautiful events, such as Combo Breaker, CEO Evo, Anime Evo in the past, where you see this old tech in action, still alive to this day. Using the old stuff, melding it with the new technology that's coming out, like we see with the Mister, and creating a beautiful thing for these old game scenes. Like it's possible. It's hard, but it's possible if you have love for the game.
Yeah. I will say that we are always moving forward in this stuff, and Super Combo. If you could hit us up on Discord and talk to us, and it's been tossed around the idea of a hardware wiki or something in the future, so we'll see where that goes.
Yes, yes. I've been meaning to talk to you about that
Yeah,
one.
yeah, yeah. We'll get something going. It'd be really interesting. But yeah, that's all we got about retro. I do want to toss it over to a special segment that is not necessarily related to fighting games. We're gonna talk about Final Fantasy XIV, the FGC Retirement Home. I'm gonna bring it over to Chickzama, and we're gonna talk a little bit about Endwalker, the new expansion releasing, and then we're gonna wrap up the show. So please stay tuned, and we're gonna make the cut. And we are now back with the third topic of this episode of the TO Desk. We are going to be talking about Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker, a bit of a phenomenon in the FGC. And, well, to bring with me, I have my fellow Final Fantasy XIV fan in our little company, Chickzama. Chick, how you doing tonight?
I am doing well. I had some good Blazu fights, some good Guilty Gear, and now I'm talking about like another good game, Final Fantasy 14.
Yeah,
I'm doing
so
alright.
I literally scoured. I literally asked. I said, line up who plays Final Fantasy 14 out of all of you fools in the 956 group, and it was between me and you. So we're gonna have to explain ourselves. We're gonna have to talk about it. But I guess since I said that I scoured the group, what do you do? What do you usually do? What is your specialty?
I would say I'm kind of like the online person, the online TO, because like 956 has been mostly an offline thing with Evo and Evo in the past years. So it's like,
Right.
I guess I kind of got brought on to assimilate people for online stuff. So yeah, I am a VTuber. I am a TO for a lot of Blazu things. If you like Blazu, you probably have seen me around. That's my game. Hashtag BBCF rollback cough.
Cough, cough,
Yeah.
cough. Hint, hint. Arc, please.
Please.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
Please.
So yeah. I mean, um, we both enjoy this game, and a lot of our listeners will probably enjoy this game that we're talking about.
Definitely.
And I wanna recap where we are. So right now, folks who are listening to this, we are recording this before we get our hands on the game. The early access will be beginning in a couple of days, and I'm sure that you will hear from us either in live streams or on Twitter or in some other form what we think of the game when it's available. But let's talk about our expectations. So, Endwalker, it is the much talked about finale of the current storyline of Final Fantasy XIV. Arguably, the reason to stick with the game is that the story has been going on for so long. It's such an integral part to the game. So this is, this feels very genuinely a big moment for the community who enjoys the content. And also, it kind of represents Final Fantasy XIV ever since 2.0 has been on an upward trajectory, if you ask me, in terms of fan base and perception. And this is, the apex of attention. Everyone is looking at this as the biggest MMO release. There's nothing else out there.
The critically acclaimed FF14 with free
You
trial
got
for
it.
Heaven's Word, guys.
You got it. You got it. So, I think it's safe to say a lot of people are, super interested and are already playing the game, and this has become much more mainstream than it ever has been. But, we have this term called the FGC Retirement Home, and that is where us old men go to live out our days, not caring about your clickbait YouTube titles and Twitter discourse, and we go and we go do our MSQs and our roulettes and all that stuff, where it's all on the outside, right? We do our little game. But I mean, despite the fact that the game is popular, maybe the only explanation for it is that the game is simply that popular, but there does seem to be a certain fixation with this game in the fighting game community, even though it's not, not a fighting game, but it's
Right,
not even close to
definitely.
that. But it's something that we all seem to we seem to frequently have a common ground with it. So what do you think that is?
I would say, I feel like everyone, at least from my experience, whenever there's a lull with patches and stuff for fighting games, if it's maybe you're a little bit worn out with your current patch or whatever, what if I want to try something else while I'm waiting for the next update or something? Oh yeah, Final Fantasy 14, that's a time sinker. So I think that might be part of the appeal, TVH.
Okay, yeah, I could see it that way, especially because we had talked about this in episode 2. We were talking about DLC characters, and we were talking about how character releases are the thing that bring you back to the game. But
Oh yeah.
character releases take time. They take months of work, right? And they
Mhm.
represent whether or not the character is interesting to you. Maybe there's a balance patch that comes with the character, maybe not. That happened in Street Fighter V. Luke released, but that's it. The balance patch is not planned until 2022. So you're either interested in the character or you're not. And
Oh, yeah.
whether or not you have any expectation of the game is not going to change if you don't care about Luke. So and I mean, kind of the same thing kind of happened with Happy Chaos for Guilty Gear Strive. I mean,
That's definitely what I've been doing. I took a break from Strive actually. I like Strive a lot of all the newest fighting games, but I kind of took a break for a while. I'm like, okay, I'll come back when Happy Chaos is announced. I
right.
didn't know when that was, but he's back. I'm like, okay, I'm back in Strive.
Yeah, exactly, right? It either does it for you or either does it for you or it doesn't. And the thing that you mentioned is that Final Fantasy XIV represents the thing that you can do in the in between, which I think
Oh,
is a good way to look at it. Probably the right way to look at it. I
there's a lot to do in
yeah,
Final Fantasy 14.
it is a never ending flow of side content and main content, even the main content. I mean, every time I someone asks me, how do you play Final Fantasy 14? I say, buckle up, kiddo, because you are going to be on this ride for a long time. And
And
you're going to enjoy it. because it's going to be a great ride.
You're also gonna hate it at times too.
Oh yeah, you know, I try to
There
just
is
be,
times.
I try to be, I try to not undersell it to people that it is a lot of
No, I don't
investment.
even mean it like that.
Yeah,
I don't even mean it like that. There's times when it's like, wow, my feelings are now crushed. I am devastated.
Oh yeah,
I
it's a
want
great
off.
story. It's an emotional story.
It's really good. It's really good, honestly. That's why I'm sticking around for it. The story. Like everyone says, like, oh yeah, you just need to play the story, blah blah. It's good, and like I was looking at people like, okay, an MMO with a really good story.
Yeah,
Okay, sure.
people don't
But no,
believe
I
it.
played it.
People don't believe it.
Yeah, then I played it, and then it's like I'm stuck. I'm hooked.
Yeah, people don't believe it, but I mean, that is the primary. You know, a lot of people ask me, you know, if they're switching over from other MMOs or if they don't have familiar, you know, they're not familiar with MMOs. It's like, okay, well, sell me on this game. What is it? It's like, okay, well, it's a story. It's a very long story, okay? There's a lot of stuff that you can do along the way, but it's a story-based MMO. You can't just you know, mindlessly go your way through it. It's going to be miserable if you try to do it that way. Which is not true of every other MMO. You know, I've played MMOs. You know, I've been a WoW player long enough that I know that you can just ignore everything and, you know, get to the content, and, you know, the game doesn't penalize you for that. But the way that Final Fantasy XIV is built, and will probably continue to be built, is to directly require you to sit down and watch the story that they've put so much time into making. And if you don't do that, then you're just going to be clicking through a bunch of speech bubbles, and it's going to be very miserable for you.
And then you're like, what happened?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
yeah,
what happened?
this person's gone now. Okay.
Oh my god, this boss
there's
just
this
did that.
magical
Why
being,
did he
yeah.
do that? It's like, yeah, you know, you missed out. It's never, it's there's always layers to every single part of the presentation, which I think is cool. So, you know, we've talked about why we like it, and we've talked about, you know, maybe a reason for why so many people in the FGC like it. But now, you know, now we're talking about Endwalker, and what expectations do you have for the game's expansion? What do you think?
I am really prepared to suffer now because it's at the final part. I'm really hoping some of my favorites do not possibly pass away.
Okay, yeah.
I'm really hoping.
Yeah, I mean, it is the quote unquote final chapter of the, what do they call it? I don't know if they said Hydaelyn or Zodiac saga. One of those. They're like,
I think they said both.
yeah, maybe Hydaelyn / Zodiac, but it is the conclusion of those storylines, right? So
Yeah, and that's huge. That's been like prevalent since 1.0. It's been all about Hydaelyn and Zodiac the entire time.
I mean, I am personally really interested in the locales that they are showing off, like Charlan in particular. I'm super excited. I love, you know, what they're pitching us visually. I'm actually very excited for the new
classes.
The new job. Yeah, I really I want to play Reaper as soon as I can. You guys are gonna out me on stream, you know, on the recording, you know, Edgelord. All right, I want to play. Listen, guys, I want to play some Testament looking dude. I want to get the new Vieira male characters, which, by the way, they did a great job with, and I want to play a Reaper,
Really good.
and I'm just gonna play like the Testament LARPer for like 2 weeks just to get it out my system. It looks cool. I think they did a great job. It's probably not gonna be what I stick with, but I really want to try it.
I do have to like hold you right there, like, bro. I'm the resident edgelord of the company. I'm just saying.
Yeah, you are.
I'm a dark main. I'm going to pick Reaper. Reaper's probably gonna be my main DPS class. Like right now, I have a dark and a dancer as like my 2 main classes.
Yeah, I just want to embrace it for a while. When the game comes out, I want to try it. I really like what they're doing, but you know, I've been a summoner for 2 expansions now, and I've been committed to that. You know, some people tell me summoners lame, and that they never give us anything. And you know what? They're coming through for us with this expansion. The reworked summoner class looks so great. I cannot ignore that, especially because the class that I have like the most investment in and just kind of the most experience in is playing summoner. So even if I want to do, for example, my gunblade, tank that I usually go to, I'm gonna go back to summoner. I'm gonna try that stuff out. I love characters that have pets in MMOs. Like I love that kind of gameplay. Which the thing about
I too would
Shadowbringers
play
is
off.
that they got rid of the pets. They kind of removed their ability to really
Yeah.
help you. They just kind of became background things. But it looks like they're kind of giving us more to work with, and they're also redoing the mechanics in a way that looks really fresh. So I am wholly excited by the gameplay. I had no opinion on the gameplay of Shadowbringers when it was coming out. I didn't really think anything about it. The story was excellent, so I didn't really complain. But I'm definitely actually in this because it's like, okay, the gameplay changes that they are introducing. Now that I'm a couple years invested in this, it looks really exciting. And then, I mean, no doubt the story is going to be awesome.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. I actually started off with a summoner when I first started at 14, and I stuck with it up until sh- uh, Heaven's Ward, and then it was like I was part dark, part summoner. I'd alter between those two.
You
So I'm
know,
I'm a little bit interested, honestly.
when I was getting started with Final Fantasy XIV, I tend to pick. All right, so I used to play World of Warcraft for many years, and I've played many other MMOs for many years aside from that. But WoW was always my thing, and I would always play Hunter, or I would play like a ranged physical DPS class. Like that was always my thing. I was like that. So I was like, you know what? This time I'm gonna do something different. I was like, I'm gonna pick something that's like a wizard. I just want to be like a crazy magician. I was like, oh, okay. Well, what do I pick? And I was like, okay, well this has Arcanist. I looked at the cover. I was like, oh, they have a big book, and they cast
The book.
spells, and I was like, oh, this looks sick. And then, it turns out I picked a pet ranged DPS class again, and I was at that point. I'm like, oh, well, this reminds me of the thing that I played for many years. But I was happy with it. I was like, oh, okay, well, it was a Stormblood that I had started playing Summoner, and Stormblood still had the pets that you have, the edgy or whatever you want to call them. They could still like have physical attacks, and they could do things for you. So when I was leveling my character in that time, I was kind of like I was having fun with that dynamic. And then they killed it in Shadowbringers. I don't know why. But maybe we'll get it back now. Yeah. So we've talked about our expectations. Do you well, I guess the other thing is do you tend are you now in the process of catching up? Are you ready to go? Do you have nothing left to do? Like where are you at with the current expansion, Shadowbringers?
I need to catch up. I've definitely been like busy with. I've actually been playing fighting games like a lot recently, so I guess like I said, I've been the type that I'll play when I'm not playing fighting game stuff, but I do need to catch up.
Okay.
I've been starting like this week, and I'm gonna go through the story content, like finish this off, and any like side quests that I need to get done.
Right. Okay, yeah. So you're in catch up mode. Well, spoilers stream. I'm also in catch up mode. I also need to catch up. I don't know how far back I am, honestly. I have no idea. I just remember that I have definitely finished a patch or two. I don't know. Like I'm literally after this, I'm gonna go find out. Like, okay, how much of this stuff do I need to complete? So I am super excited to catch up. I'm super excited to get back in there. I will probably not see many FGC names because I do not play on Aether Data Center. That is another thing. I guess we need to mention that. A lot of FGC people play on Aether Data Center.
Yeah, honestly, it's either Aether or Primal.
Yeah, Aether or Primal. Those are the ones I've heard. I've heard a lot of people on Aether. I have friend groups that are on Aether. I am not Aether gang.
I'm on Aether. I'm Aether gang. Hello.
So you guys will probably see a lot of each other, and I will have to wait until cross data center because I am not rolling a new character on another DC. I have my group. We are all excited, and Unfortunately, Cross DC is not coming with launch. But given the sheer amount of
fair.
people who have shown interest in the game, this is an unprecedented time in terms of player base. So
Can you imagine though, like a day one where we have cross data center and it's a new patch? Oh,
yeah,
Jesus
that sounds like a lot of
yeah.
blow-ups. I mean, I imagine that they were
Yeah.
confident in doing it. It's just that they I guess some people will recall when the entire data center, I don't remember which one it was, Primal, that was closed. You
Primal.
just could not make characters on the entire data center. Like, that level of stress, will probably happen again when launch day comes. Even early access. I suspect that is gonna early access is gonna be a blow up. Honestly, I mean, I'm pre-ordering. I gotta go put it in yet. I haven't done so. I know I'm gonna be there during early access, but I wholly expect that it's just gonna be a lot of people, because they're gonna buy the expansion anyway. They probably already have. So
I have. Hello.
exactly. I don't see anybody. I don't know why anybody would be on the fence at this point. Like, the game, the reviews are not out yet, and the reviews probably won't come out, immediately after the early access or anything like that. But everyone kind of has their expectations very high. I mean, myself included. So I expect Yoshi P and his gang to come through. Obviously,
I feel
we
like
will.
Yoshi P can't do any wrong at this point. TBH.
That's another thing, right? A lot of us are, we hold this man up there on the pedestal. He's gonna do it. He's gonna come through. And I mean, I'm sure that you guys will, like I said at the beginning, you guys will hear what we actually have to say about that later. But here's a snapshot of our expectations, and when you guys hear it, when with the games already in your hands, you can see if we were right about that. And we'll have to do a summary of how we feel about it later on in the future. But yeah, I think that's gonna wrap us on this topic, and that's gonna wrap us on episode number 3 of the TO Desk. So thank you, Chick, for talking with me, talking a little bit of off topic about stuff like that. But we in the FGC, I think it's healthy. I just want to say really quickly as a parting message to everybody who's listening, it's healthy to talk about other games that are not fighting games in fighting game circles. Please do not get on each other's cases about it. It feels bad, and it really limits what you can enjoy. So have these kinds of conversations with the people around you. Find out what they like. Just enjoy yourselves. But that, I think, is going to wrap it. So thank you guys for listening. Again, we are available on YouTube. Look us up, 956 Productions. We're also going to be available on Spotify. You can go to 956pro.com/YouTube to go to our YouTube channel. And, of course, your favorite podcast channels as well. So thank you guys for listening once again. Goodbye.
Sayonara.